Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome to Mr. Mahmoud Helmi channel. Today, inshallah, we will discuss unit or chapter 3 from A Tale of Two Cities. The title of the chapter is The Shoemaker. The place here, Saint Antoine, Paris, France. Time 1775, 18th century. We finished with chapter 2 when Monsieur Devange left Mr. Darnay Lucy Manet in his wine shop so as to meet her father, Mrs. Manet's father, Dr. Manet, after he had spent 18 years in prison. Okay, he took them upstairs in the attic so as to see her father. What do you think the state or the condition she will see her father in? She will see a white-haired man. He was sitting on a low bench, his back to the door, facing the room's only window. The wreck of Dr. Manet. Here the writer used the expression the wreck of Dr. Manet. We always use the word wreck when we see a broken ship, the wreck of a ship. But here he used the word wreck for to describe Dr. Manet after he had spent 18 years in prison. He described him as the wreck of a man, the wreck of a ship. Okay, when Devange opened the room, Mr. Lorry saw a white-haired man sitting on a low bench and busy working on a pair of shoes. He was giving his back to the door and facing the only window in the room. His long white hair and beard contrasted sharply with his dark eyebrows and indicated that they have become so from suffering and agony rather than by age. Mr. Dr. Manet now, he became an old man, okay, after he had spent 18 years in prison for something that he didn't do. Okay, he was oppressed, he was put in prison for something that he didn't do. Okay, because he saw a crime of some powerful men or some men who ruled that in that time. When Devange asked him to tell the visitors his name, he replied 105 North Tower. As you know, my dear students, that the prisoners in prisons, they are not called by their names. They are called by the number of the cells they are staying in. Okay, so he was used to be called 105. He used to hear that number for 18 years, so he forgot his name. If you ask him now, what's your name? He will say 105 because he almost lost his mind. He almost forgot his name, okay, by the effect of the so long time that he had spent in prison in a solitary cell. Mr. Lorry tried to make the old man remember him as an old faithful friend and banker, or to remember his faithful servant, but in vain. Lucy Manet put her fear aside and moved slowly towards her father. And stood beside him. Dr. Manet caught sight of her skirt and raised his head slowly until he was looking into her face. The same strands of golden hair. The poor man was confused to see a young lady in his prison cell, for he still believed he was in prison. He wondered, "You are not the jailer's daughter." Dr. Manet, because he spent so much time in prison, he still believed that he was in prison. He was not expected that he is not now out of prison. So when he saw the girl, okay, his daughter, he thought that she is the daughter of the jailer. Okay. Dr. Mani took out a folded rag where he had kept a few strands of his wife's golden hair and picked up Lucy's hair with a gasp, saying, "It is the same. How can it be? When was it?" He couldn't bear the shock that the hair of the girl was the same of the strand of hair that he kept from his wife after she put her full head on his shoulder and lift some strands of her hair on his shoulder. He kept these strands of hair in a rag, okay, and when Lucy came, she had the same features of her mother's face, and she had also the same color of her mother's hair. So he said, Lucy golden hair and her lovely face made the old man remember his wife, whom he had last seen 18 years earlier before he was taken to prison. So luckily, he began to regain some of his memory. Lucy fell to her knees and took her father in her arms, saying, "All I can tell you now is that your misery is ended. I will take you to England and make you well and make a home for us." Mr. Lorry and Devange made the preparations for the journey back to England as soon as possible. Now Mr. Devange has prepared everything to take Dr. Manette, Lucy, and Lorry to leave France quickly before they discover his absence and his that he left the prison. When he was leaving, Dr. Manette looked up, searching for the tower of the prison and the guards, but he only saw Madame Defarge, who leaned against the door of the wine shop, knitting. He was still believing, or he thought that he is still in the prison, so he thought that he will see the towers of the prison. He couldn't imagine or believe that he is now out of prison. And for the long time that he had spent in the prison, he even forgot his real job as a doctor, and he began to think as himself as a shoemaker. He forgot his job as a doctor, and because he used to spend his time in the prison making shoes, he thought himself as a shoemaker. So when he began to leave the attic of the Monsieur Devange, he began to collect his tools, and that will help him to make shoes. I hope he won't regret being recalled to life, whispered Devange as the carriage went away. Commentary. Dr. Manette was, this is a summary of the chapter. Dr. Manette was once a great and skillful doctor in France. Although we are introduced to him as a shoemaker, this shows how far he suffered and how his mind and the body weakened as a result of his long imprisonment. This also shows how fearful the Bastille is. The man, and as I told you before, the Bastille was the most famous prison all over the world. And it was the symbol of oppression at the time before the French Revolution. The man became a shoemaker, so weak and shaking, he isn't sure of anything. He even forgot his name. He is shocked when he is called by his real name. When he was leaving that dreadful city where he suffered great agony, he didn't forget his shoemaking tools, which became an important part of him. Now, my dear students, we will have questions and answers about the chapters. Please be careful. Okay. Question number one, as I told you before, we have two kind of questions, WH questions and comment questions that depends on quotation from the text itself. Then you have to write your comments. You will say who said that to whom and your opinion about that quotation. That was 105 North Tower. Comment. That was Dr. Manis' answer when Devansh asked him about his name. That was the number of his literary cell, okay, because he was left alone in one cell in which he had been imprisoned for 18 years. This was the name he got used to hearing for 18 years that he forgot his own name. What effect had prison left on Dr. Manet? Dr. Manet was greatly affected. He became a wreck of a man. He suffered the loss of mind, the weakness in body. He became frightened, shaking, and uncertain of anything. He could remember nothing of his past life, even his name. Describe the meeting between Lucy and Dr. Manet. When Lucy first saw her father, she pitied him, his poor condition. She was afraid to get closer to him. When she stood beside him and his eyes caught the sight of her, he stared at her because she reminded him of his wife. Question number four. That night long ago, when I was called out of the house, she had laid her head on my shoulder. She was afraid for me to go. Comment. Here, Mr. Dr. Manet began to remember the last scene when he saw his wife before he was taken to the prison. His wife was afraid. She put her head on his shoulder and she lifted some strands of her hair on his shoulder that he collected and put it in his pocket and kept it for 18 years. When he saw his daughter, he began to remember that scene. Dr. Manet said this when he saw Lucy. She reminded him of her mother and of the night he was taken away to prison. She was sitting with him, lying her head on his shoulder when he was called out. Lucy, Lucy's golden hair made Dr. Manet remember a detailed scene that had happened 18 years earlier. What is the significance of that? Okay. What is your explanation of that? Here, what is the significance of that? Give an explanation of that scene. Okay. Dr. Manet had kept a few strands of his wife's golden hair. When he saw that Lucy had the same hair, his memory was refreshed, and he remembered the moment he was taken. Corrected here, he was taken, not taking, he was taken out of his house to the prison 18, not 8, 18 years earlier. This shows that the man's memory wasn't completely lost, and there was a good possibility for him to lead a normal life once more. And that's what we will see in the next chapter. You are not the jailer's daughter. Comment. These words, of course, were said by Dr. Manet when he saw Lucy Manet for the first time because his eyes were not accustomed to see anyone strange. His eyes used to see only the jailers, okay, the guards of the prison. When he saw the girl, he thought that she is the daughter of the jailer of his cell. Dr. Manet was confused when he saw a young lady in his prison cell. He thought he was still in prison and wondered that what brought that young lady here. He thought that he was still in prison. Do you believe that? But when he saw that the young lady had the same strands of golden hair of his late wife, his weak memory was refreshed. It is the same. It is the same. How can it be? When was it? When was it? Comment. And here when he said, when was it? What did he mean by this? When was that happened? When that happened? When because he left his wife and she was pregnant of her child Lucy Manet. He didn't even see his daughter, his wife. He left his wife while she was pregnant of her his child Lucy Manet. So he said, when was it? Okay, when was that happened? He meant that. Dr. Maris said this when he saw Lucy's hair. He was shocked that the young lady had the same hair as his late wife. He didn't know of the birth of his daughter because she was born after he had gone to prison. He wanted to know how and when that happened. These are some extra questions. I want you to read the summary again and read the questions and answer. And it's better for you to read the text from the original text, okay, and try to answer these questions. Why did Lucy want to take her father away from Paris? Where would she take him? How did prison life affect Dr. Manet? Describe Dr. Manet after his long imprisonment. Could Dr. Manet remember anything of his past life? Why? Why did Lucy catch the attention of Dr. Manet? Who did he think she was at first? As I told you, he thought that she is the daughter of the jailer. How could he recognize her when he took out the strand of hair and compared the strand of hair that he kept from his wife with her hair, and she began to remember his wife? I hope he won't regret being recalled to life. Comment. Of course, these words were said by Monsieur Devange. Of course, he is commenting, or he is he wanted to say that he hopes that he might not regret regret the moment of being away or being out of the prison. Okay, thank you very much. I hope you have enjoyed the explanation of chapter 3. Till we meet again in chapter 4, I wish you the best of luck. Thank you very much. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and see you. Bye bye.